The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, crisp and official, bearing the seal of the United States Army Special Operations Command. Maya Chen stared at the words that had shattered her dreams for the third consecutive year. After careful consideration, we regret to inform you that your application for Special Forces Assessment and Selection has been denied. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Too small at 5'2". Too quiet during leadership evaluations. Insufficient combat experience. The evaluation board saw a soft-spoken logistics officer from San Francisco who'd spent most of her military career behind a desk, managing supply chains and coordinating equipment transfers. They couldn't see past the wire-rimmed glasses, the careful way she spoke, or the fact that she'd never fired a shot in anger during her 8 years of service. What they didn't know was that Maya Chen had more combat experience than most of the instructors who'd rejected her application. What they couldn't see beneath her long-sleeved uniform was a tattoo that told a story she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Camp Mackenzie sat in the harsh desert of Nevada, a training facility designed to break the strongest soldiers and rebuild them into something harder. The Advanced Combat Training course was considered a stepping stone to Special Forces selection, a place where conventional soldiers could prove they belonged among the elite. Maya had managed to secure a spot in the course through sheer persistence, calling in every favor, and leveraging every connection she'd built during her military career. The other candidates looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a Special Forces movie. Staff Sergeant Marcus Torres stood 6'4" with arms like tree trunks and a chest full of combat ribbons from 3 deployments in Afghanistan. Sergeant First Class Jennifer Walsh had the lean, predatory look of someone who'd spent years hunting insurgents through the mountains of Iraq. Captain Bradley Morrison carried himself with the confidence of an Airborne Ranger who'd led men through some of the fiercest fighting of the past decade. Then there was Maya, barely clearing the minimum height requirements, looking more like a college professor than a warrior. Her gear was perfectly organized, her uniform immaculate, but she moved with the careful deliberation of someone who'd spent more time in air-conditioned offices than in the field. The other candidates noticed her immediately, not because she impressed them, but because she seemed so completely out of place. "Check out the supply clerk," Torres whispered to Walsh as they watched Maya methodically arrange her equipment in the barracks. "Someone in personnel must have made a mistake. She belongs in accounting, not advanced combat training." Walsh studied Maya with the analytical eye of a professional soldier. Everything about the smaller woman suggested clerical work rather than combat operations. Her movements were precise, but lacked the fluid aggression that marked experienced fighters. Her hands showed no calluses from weapons handling or rope work. Even the way she packed her rucksack spoke of someone who'd learned military procedures from manuals rather than hard experience. "Maybe she's got connections," Walsh suggested. "Politician's daughter or something. You know how it is. Someone makes a phone call, and suddenly the standards don't apply." Captain Morrison, who'd been listening from his bunk, turned to study Maya with undisguised skepticism. At 32, he'd served with enough genuine warriors to recognize the real thing, and Maya Chen didn't fit the profile. Her file listed 8 years of service, but all in logistics and supply roles. No combat deployments, no specialized training, no indication that she'd ever been in a situation where lives depended on her performance under fire. "She won't last 2 days," Morrison announced with the certainty of someone who'd seen plenty of wannabe warriors wash out of demanding programs. "The instructors will eat her alive during the first field exercise." The training cadre at Camp Mackenzie had a reputation for crushing the spirits of soldiers who didn't belong in elite units. Master Sergeant Diego Ramirez, the senior instructor, had spent 15 years in Special Forces before transitioning to training duties. He'd seen every type of soldier imaginable, from genuine heroes to dangerous incompetents, and he prided himself on his ability to identify each category within minutes of meeting them. When Ramirez first laid eyes on Maya during the initial formation, his assessment was immediate and damning. Small frame, soft appearance, nervous energy. She looked like someone who'd gotten lost on the way to a different kind of military school. Her uniform was regulation perfect, but it was the kind of perfection that came from having plenty of time to prepare rather than from instinctive military bearing. "Chen," Ramirez barked, consulting his roster. "Logistics officer, 8 years service, no combat deployments." What makes you think you belong in advanced combat training? Maya's response was quiet, but steady. I believe I have skills that could be valuable to special operations, Master Sergeant. The answer drew snickers from several other candidates. Torres rolled his eyes, while Walsh shook her head in apparent disbelief. What skills could a supply officer possibly have that would matter in the kind of high-stakes combat operations that define Special Forces work? Skills, Ramirez repeated, letting skepticism drip from his voice. And what skills would those be, Chen? Are you going to requisition the enemy to death? Maybe file a procurement request for their surrender? More laughter from the formation. Maya's cheeks reddened slightly, but she maintained her military bearing. I'm proficient in multiple languages, Master Sergeant. I have extensive experience with logistics coordination in challenging environments, and I believe I can contribute to mission success in ways that might not be immediately obvious. It was exactly the kind of vague, bureaucratic answer that confirmed Ramirez's initial assessment. Maya Chen was a paper pusher who'd somehow talked her way into a program designed for warriors. She'd be gone before the end of the week, probably crying about how the standards were unfair or the instructors were too harsh. The first week of training focused on basic combat skills that any Special Forces candidate should have mastered years earlier. Weapons handling, small unit tactics, navigation, and physical conditioning. For most of the candidates, it was a review of familiar material presented at a higher intensity level. For Maya, it should have been a brutal introduction to skills she'd never properly developed. But something strange began to happen. While Maya looked awkward during classroom instruction and seemed lost during tactical discussions, her performance during practical exercises was surprisingly competent. Her marksmanship scores were consistently high, though she held her rifle in a way that suggested formal training rather than natural talent. Her navigation was flawless, but she used techniques that weren't taught in standard military schools. Most puzzling of all was her performance during combatives training. Hand-to-hand combat was typically the area where smaller soldiers struggled most against larger, stronger opponents. Torres, who'd been a wrestler in college before joining the Army, expected to dominate Maya during grappling exercises. Instead, he found himself repeatedly taken down by techniques he'd never encountered before. Where did you learn that? Torres asked after Maya had used some kind of joint lock to force him into submission. The move had been quick, precise, and completely unexpected. Self-defense classes, Maya replied, but there was something evasive in her answer that suggested the truth was more complicated. Walsh, who'd been watching the exchange, stepped forward for her turn. As a veteran of multiple combat deployments, she learned fighting techniques from sources ranging from Army combatives instructors to foreign special operations personnel she'd worked with overseas. She approached Maya with confidence, expecting to quickly establish dominance through superior size, strength, and experience. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Maya moved with a fluid efficiency that spoke of training far beyond recreational self-defense classes. She neutralized Walsh's initial attack, established control, and ended the engagement with a chokehold that left the larger woman unconscious for several seconds. What the hell was that? Walsh demanded when she recovered, anger and confusion evident in her voice. That wasn't standard Army combatives. Maya helped Walsh to her feet, with an expression that mixed concern with what might have been carefully controlled satisfaction. Are you okay? I didn't mean to apply the hold for so long. I'm fine, Walsh snapped, but I want to know where you learned to fight like that. Those weren't techniques from any manual I've ever seen. Before Maya could answer, Master Sergeant Ramirez called for the next pair of combatants, but he'd been watching Maya's performance with growing interest. The small logistics officer was demonstrating skills that didn't match her background or appearance. Her techniques were too advanced, too specialized, too precise for someone whose military experience consisted entirely of supply chain management. That evening, as the candidates cleaned their equipment and prepared for the next day's training, speculation about Maya's background dominated conversations throughout the barracks. Some suggested she might have civilian martial arts training that wasn't reflected in her military file. Others wondered if she'd received informal instruction from special operations personnel during her logistics assignments. Captain Morrison had a different theory. She's sandbagging, he announced to a group of candidates gathered around his bunk. She's got training she's not talking about, and she's pretending to be weaker than she is. The question is why. Maybe she's trying to surprise the instructors, suggested Torres. Show up looking like easy prey, then demonstrate hidden capabilities when it matters most. Or maybe she's got something to hide, Walsh added darkly. People don't develop those kinds of fighting skills working in supply warehouses. There's more to Chen's story than what's in her official file. Across the barracks, Maya sat on her bunk, methodically cleaning her rifle while listening to the conversations swirling around her. She'd known that her performance during combatives training would raise questions, but she hadn't been able to resist the opportunity to silence some of the doubt and condescension she'd been facing since arriving at Camp Mackenzie. The problem was that every demonstration of her true capabilities brought her closer to questions she couldn't answer honestly. The techniques she'd used against Torres and Walsh weren't learned in self-defense classes or picked up casually during logistics assignments. They were part of a skill set she'd developed during 5 years of operations that officially never existed, in places that didn't appear on any military maps, against enemies whose names would never be spoken in public forums. Maya rolled up her sleeves to clean her rifle more thoroughly, and the motion revealed the edge of a tattoo on her left forearm. It was mostly hidden by her uniform during normal activities, but close observers might have noticed intricate black lines that suggested a larger, more complex design. The tattoo was beautiful in its way, but there was something about the style and symbolism that spoke of meanings beyond mere decoration. Torres, who'd been watching Maya from across the room, caught a glimpse of the tattoo and felt a chill of recognition. He'd seen similar designs before, during his deployment in Afghanistan, worn by American personnel who didn't appear on official rosters, and whose presence was never acknowledged in after-action reports. They were ghost soldiers, operators whose very existence was classified, who moved through war zones like shadows and left no trace of their passage. But that was impossible. Maya Chen was a logistics officer from California with no combat experience and no specialized training. She couldn't possibly be connected to the kind of black operations that produce soldiers with tattoos like the one Torres thought he'd glimpsed. Could she? As the lights went out in the barracks and the candidates settled in for another night of uneasy sleep, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling. She'd managed to maintain her cover for 5 years, building a new identity as a conventional supply officer while trying to forget the person she'd been before. But coming to Camp Mackenzie had been a mistake. The kind of training they were conducting here was too similar to her previous life, and her instincts were too strong to completely suppress. She'd told herself that she could blend in, that she could complete the course without revealing too much about her background. But every day brought new challenges that tested her ability to appear weak and inexperienced, while possessing skills that exceeded those of most special operations personnel. The tattoo on her arm seemed to burn in the darkness, a permanent reminder of operations she could never discuss and teammates she'd never see again. It was a mark of honor in communities that didn't officially exist, a symbol of belonging to an A brotherhood that transcended normal military boundaries. But it was also a liability, a piece of evidence that could unravel the carefully constructed fiction of her current life. Maya Chen, mild-mannered logistics officer, was a role she'd been playing for 5 years. But beneath that performance was someone else entirely, someone whose real name was known only to a handful of intelligence officials, and whose service record was buried so deep that even she couldn't access it anymore. The question was how long she could maintain the deception before someone discovered the truth about who she really was and what she'd done in the shadows of America's secret wars. The second week of training introduced advanced tactical scenarios designed to test candidates under realistic combat conditions. The exercises were complex, involving multiple objectives, time pressure, and the kind of split-second decision-making that separated competent soldiers from true operators. Master Sergeant Ramirez and his team of instructors watched carefully, evaluating not just performance, but leadership potential, adaptability, and grace under pressure. Maya continued to surprise everyone with her competence, but in ways that were becoming increasingly difficult to explain. During a night navigation exercise through hostile terrain, she moved with the confidence of someone who'd done similar operations countless times before. Her route selection was perfect, her noise discipline was exemplary, and she reached the objective ahead of candidates with significantly more field experience. "How did you know about the creek bed shortcut?" Walsh asked after the exercise concluded. "That route wasn't on any of our maps." Maya's answer was carefully neutral. "I studied the terrain carefully during our reconnaissance time. The topographical features suggested water drainage patterns that could provide concealed movement routes." It was a plausible explanation, But Walsh had been studying Maya's performance for days now, and patterns were emerging that didn't match the official narrative about her background. Maya's tactical instincts were too refined, her technical knowledge too specific, her confidence in dangerous situations too genuine for someone whose military experience consisted entirely of logistics work. Captain Morrison was reaching similar conclusions, but his growing suspicions were mixed with something that might have been respect. Maya had quietly established herself as one of the most capable candidates in the course, despite being dismissed and underestimated by almost everyone around her. Her leadership style was subtle but effective, her problem-solving skills were exceptional, and her ability to remain calm under pressure was remarkable. During a particularly challenging tactical scenario, Maya found herself in charge of a squad that included both Torres and Morrison. The exercise required the team to infiltrate a defended position, gather intelligence, and extract without being detected. It was the kind of mission that tested every skill a special operations candidate might need in real-world situations. Maya's approach to the problem was methodical and sophisticated. She spent considerable time studying the target, identifying patrol patterns, mapping security measures, and developing contingency plans for various complications. Her briefing to the team was concise but comprehensive, covering every aspect of the operation with the kind of detail that suggested extensive experience in similar situations. "Chen knows what she's doing," Torres admitted quietly to Walsh as they prepared their equipment. "I don't know where she learned this stuff, but she's got a better grasp of small unit tactics than most of the infantry officers I've worked with." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The operation itself was a masterpiece of planning and execution. Maya led the team through a complex infiltration that avoided every security measure, positioned them perfectly for intelligence gathering, and coordinated a withdrawal that left no trace of their presence. The instructors monitoring the exercise were impressed despite themselves, recognizing professional-level competence that exceeded their expectations for any candidate in the course. But Maya's performance raised as many questions as it answered. Her techniques weren't taught in conventional military schools. Her equipment usage showed familiarity with specialized gear that logistics officers shouldn't have access to, and her comfort level in high-risk situations spoke of extensive operational experience. Master Sergeant Ramirez found himself studying Maya with new interest after the infiltration exercise. He'd initially dismissed her as a misplaced bureaucrat, but her consistent performance was forcing him to reconsider that assessment. There were aspects of her skill set that reminded him of operators he'd worked with during his own Special Forces career, personnel whose backgrounds were often deliberately obscured for security reasons. After the exercise concluded, Ramirez approached Maya as she cleaned her equipment. "Chen, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer." Maya looked up from her rifle, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course, Master Sergeant. Where did you really learn those tactics? And don't give me another story about studying manuals or attending weekend training courses. What you demonstrated tonight wasn't amateur hour. That was professional-level operational planning and execution." For a moment, Maya seemed to weigh her options. Ramirez could see something in her eyes, a depth of experience that didn't match her official background. When she finally answered, her voice carried a note of resigned honesty. "Some things are better left in the past, Master Sergeant. I'm here to earn my place in Special Forces based on current capabilities, not previous experiences that aren't relevant to this evaluation." It wasn't a denial, but it wasn't a confession either. Ramirez recognized the careful phrasing of someone who'd been trained to protect classified information, even when direct questions made evasion difficult. Maya Chen was clearly more than she appeared to be, but she wasn't ready to reveal the full truth about her background. That night, as the candidates relaxed after another intense day of training, conversation inevitably turned to Maya's mysterious competence. The speculation had evolved from dismissive jokes to genuine puzzlement about her true identity and experience. "She's got to be former Special Operations," Walsh insisted to a group gathered around her bunk. "The way she handled that infiltration tonight, the techniques she used, the confidence she showed in a high-risk environment. You don't develop those skills working in supply warehouses. But there's no record of Special Operations training in her file," Morrison pointed out. "I've seen her personnel folder. 8 years of logistics assignments, no combat deployments, no specialized schools. Either the file is incomplete, or she developed those skills somewhere else entirely." Torres, who'd been quietly listening to the conversation, finally spoke up. I saw something the other night when she was cleaning her rifle. There's a tattoo on her left arm, mostly hidden by her uniform. I only caught a glimpse, but it looked familiar, like something I'd seen before in Afghanistan. What kind of tattoo? Walsh asked, with obvious interest. Torres hesitated, clearly uncertain about whether he should share his suspicions. It looked like some kind of unit insignia, but not from any conventional military organization. The style was different, more symbolic, like something you'd see from specialized units that don't officially exist. The implications of Torres's observation sent a chill through the group. They were all familiar with rumors about classified military units that operated outside normal chains of command, conducting missions that were never acknowledged publicly. Such units were populated by soldiers whose identities were carefully protected and whose service records were deliberately obscured. If Maya Chen was really connected to that shadowy world, it would explain everything about her mysterious competence. It would also mean that she was operating under deep cover, hiding her true background for reasons that probably involved national security considerations. We should be careful about this, Morrison warned. If Chen is really who we think she might be, then asking too many questions could cause problems for all of us. Some secrets are classified for good reasons, but curiosity was stronger than caution, and the mystery of Maya Chen had become the dominant topic of conversation throughout the barracks. Every candidate had noticed her unusual combination of apparent inexperience and demonstrated competence. Some were beginning to suspect that they were training alongside someone whose true identity was far more significant than anyone had realized. Maya herself was acutely aware of the growing interest in her background, and she knew that her continued success in the training program was making it increasingly difficult to maintain her cover. Every exercise brought new challenges that tested her ability to appear competent without revealing the full extent of her capabilities. The tattoo on her arm seemed to burn whenever she thought about the conversations she'd overheard. It was a permanent reminder of a life she'd tried to leave behind, a symbol of belonging to a community that existed in the spaces between official military structures. She'd gotten it during her final operation, a mark of respect for teammates who died in service to missions that would never be acknowledged. Now that tattoo was becoming a liability, a piece of evidence that threatened to unravel 5 years of careful reconstruction. Maya had built her new identity as a logistics officer because she'd wanted a normal military career, something stable and predictable after years of living in the shadows. But coming to camp, Mackenzie had awakened instincts and abilities she'd thought were safely buried. The question was whether she could complete the training program without revealing too much about her past, or whether the pressure of maintaining her cover would force her to abandon her dreams of Special Forces service once again. As she lay in her bunk that night, listening to the whispered conversations about her identity, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She'd come too far to quit now, invested too much in rebuilding her life to walk away because of fear. If maintaining her cover became impossible, she'd deal with the consequences when they arose. But she wouldn't give up on her dreams because others were asking uncomfortable questions. Maya Chen, logistics officer and aspiring Special Forces candidate, would see this training through to its conclusion, regardless of what it might cost her. The tattoo on her arm was a reminder of who she'd been, but it didn't have to define who she was becoming. She'd find a way to bridge the gap between her hidden past and her hoped-for future, even if it meant taking risks that could destroy everything she'd worked to build. By the end of the second week, Maya had established herself as one of the most capable candidates in the course, despite continued skepticism about her background and experience. Her performance had been consistently excellent, her leadership had been quietly effective, and her ability to handle pressure had impressed even the most demanding instructors. But success came with its own dangers. The better she performed, the more attention she attracted, and the harder it became to maintain the fiction of her limited experience. Maya was walking a tightrope between demonstrating enough competence to succeed in the program and revealing so much capability that her cover story became impossible to maintain. The third week would bring the most challenging phase of training, exercises that would test candidates to their absolute limits and reveal the true extent of their abilities. Maya knew that the coming tests would either cement her place in the program or expose the truth about her identity in ways that could destroy everything she'd worked to achieve. The stakes were rising, and Maya Chen was running out of ways to hide who she really was. The third week of advanced combat training began with an unexpected announcement that sent ripples of anxiety through the candidate barracks. Master Sergeant Ramirez stood before the assembled soldiers with an expression that suggested significant changes were coming to their comfortable routine. "Gentlemen and ladies," Ramirez began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen combat in places most people couldn't pronounce. "Starting today, we're implementing individual psychological evaluations alongside your tactical training. Each candidate will spend time with Dr. Sarah Martinez, our staff psychologist, to assess your mental fitness for special operations work." The news wasn't entirely unexpected. Psychological screening was a standard component of Special Forces selection, designed to identify candidates who possessed the mental resilience necessary for high-stress operations. But the timing felt ominous to Maya, who'd been struggling to maintain her cover identity while demonstrating enough competence to remain in the program. Dr. Martinez was a compact woman in her early 40s, with the kind of penetrating gaze that suggested she'd spent years learning to read people's deepest motivations and hidden fears. Her office was located in the administrative building, a sterile environment designed to make subjects comfortable while revealing their psychological vulnerabilities. Maya was scheduled for her evaluation on Wednesday morning, giving her 2 days to prepare for what would likely be the greatest test of her ability to maintain her fictional background. Psychological evaluations were notoriously difficult to deceive, especially when conducted by experienced professionals who understood the techniques used by intelligence personnel to hide their true identities. The first candidate to undergo evaluation was Staff Sergeant Torres, who emerged from Dr. Martinez's office with a thoughtful expression that suggested the session had been more intense than expected. When pressed by other candidates for details, Torres was deliberately vague about the specific questions he'd been asked, but his demeanor suggested the evaluation had probed deeply into his motivations, experiences, and psychological makeup. "She knows what she's doing," Torres warned the others. "Don't try to bullshit her. She'll see right through it, and you'll end up looking worse than if you'd just been honest from the beginning." Captain Morrison underwent his evaluation on Tuesday afternoon, spending nearly 3 hours in Dr. Martinez's office, before emerging with a satisfied expression that suggested he'd performed well. As a career officer with multiple combat deployments and a clear record of leadership under pressure, Morrison had little to hide and every reason to present his authentic self during psychological screening. But Maya's situation was fundamentally different. Her entire presence at Camp Mackenzie was based on a carefully constructed fiction about her background and experience. The person Dr. Martinez would be evaluating officially didn't exist, and the person who did exist couldn't be acknowledged without compromising national security operations that were still classified at the highest levels. Tuesday night found Maya lying awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling while considering her options. She could attempt to maintain her cover story during the psychological evaluation, but experienced psychologists were trained to detect deception through verbal and nonverbal cues that were difficult to control consciously. Alternatively, she could reveal enough truth to satisfy Dr. Martinez's professional curiosity without compromising classified operations or exposing the full extent of her background. Neither option was particularly appealing. Lying to a skilled psychologist carried significant risks of exposure, while telling the truth could destroy 5 years of careful identity reconstruction and potentially trigger security investigations that would end her military career permanently. As Maya wrestled with these impossible choices, she became aware of whispered conversations taking place throughout the barracks. The mystery of her true identity had become a source of fascination for other candidates, who spent increasing amounts of time speculating about her background and the source of her mysterious competence. "I'm telling you, she's got to be former CIA or something," Walsh insisted quietly to a group gathered near the latrine. The way she handled that infiltration exercise, the tactical knowledge she displayed, the comfort level with high-risk operations. You don't develop those skills in logistics school. "Maybe she's a plant," suggested another candidate. "Someone sent here to evaluate the training program or assess instructor performance. It would explain why she's so competent but trying to hide it." Torres, who'd been listening to the speculation with growing unease, finally shared his suspicions about Maya's tattoo. "I saw part of it again today when she was changing her shirt. It's definitely some kind of unit insignia, but not from any organization I recognize. The design is too sophisticated for a conventional military unit." The revelation that Maya possessed what appeared to be a specialized unit tattoo elevated the speculation to new levels of intensity. Several candidates had served with classified units or worked alongside personnel whose identities were officially obscured, and they recognized the implications of Torres's observation. "Black Ops units use tattoos like that," Morrison said quietly. "Symbols that identify membership in organizations that don't officially exist." If Chen really has that kind of marking, it means she's connected to operations that are classified way above our security clearance levels. The growing awareness that Maya might be operating under deep cover created a complex dynamic within the candidate group. Some were impressed by the possibility that they were training alongside a genuine black operations veteran. Others were concerned about the deception and wondered what it meant for their own evaluations and chances of selection. But the most significant reaction came from Master Sergeant Ramirez, who'd been quietly monitoring the candidates' conversations and drawing his own conclusions about Maya's mysterious background. Ramirez had spent 15 years in Special Forces, including assignments that brought him into contact with personnel from highly classified units whose existence was rarely acknowledged publicly. The combination of Maya's demonstrated competence, her suspicious background, and the candidate's speculation about her tattoo triggered recognition in Ramirez's experienced mind. He'd seen similar patterns before, during joint operations with units that operated outside normal military structures and whose personnel carried markings that identified them to others in the classified community. Wednesday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Maya reported to Dr. Martinez's office at precisely 0800, her uniform impeccable and her expression carefully controlled. She'd decided during the sleepless night to attempt a modified truth strategy, revealing enough authentic information to satisfy the psychologist's questions while protecting the most sensitive aspects of her background. Dr. Martinez's office was furnished with comfortable chairs, neutral artwork, and the kind of calming environment designed to encourage honest communication. The psychologist herself was professional but warm, projecting the competence and trustworthiness necessary for her role in evaluating potential special operations personnel. "Please, have a seat wherever you're comfortable," Dr. Martinez said, gesturing towards several seating options. "I know these evaluations can feel intimidating, but I want you to think of this as a conversation rather than an interrogation." Maya chose a chair that provided clear sight lines to both the door and windows, a tactical consideration that she implemented automatically before realizing that her choice might reveal more about her background than intended. Dr. Martinez noticed the selection with professional interest, making a discreet note on her tablet. "Let's start with some basic information. Drive," Martinez continued. "I've reviewed your personnel file, but I'd like to hear about your military experience in your own words. What drew you to the Army initially, and how did you end up in logistics?" The question was deceptively simple, but Maya recognized it as the opening move in a sophisticated psychological assessment. Her answer would establish the foundation for everything that followed, and any inconsistencies or evasions would be carefully noted and explored in subsequent questions. "I joined the Army because I wanted to serve my country," Maya began, sticking as closely to truth as possible. "I was drawn to logistics because I have strong organizational skills, and I believed I could contribute to mission success through efficient resource management." It was a perfectly reasonable answer, but Dr. Martinez's expression suggested she was listening for subtleties beyond the literal content of Maya's words. The psychologist's training would have prepared her to detect signs of deception, emotional distress, or hidden motivations that subjects might not consciously recognize themselves. "Your performance in this training program has been exceptional," Dr. Martinez observed. "Your instructors are impressed by your tactical knowledge and operational competence. Where did you develop those skills during your logistics career?" The question struck directly at the heart of Maya's deception. Any honest answer would require acknowledging training and experience that weren't reflected in her official military record. But evasion would likely trigger deeper investigation from someone with Dr. Martinez's professional expertise. "I've always been interested in tactical operations," Maya replied carefully. "I've studied extensively on my own time, attended additional training courses when possible, and learned from colleagues who had operational experience." Dr. Martinez made another note, her expression remaining neutral but focused. "That's commendable initiative. Can you tell me about some of the specific training courses you attended? I'd like to understand how you developed such advanced capabilities." Maya felt the trap closing around her carefully constructed fiction. Any specific details about training courses would be subject to verification, but vague answers would likely trigger suspicion from someone trained to detect deception. She was being maneuvered into a position where maintaining her cover story was becoming increasingly difficult. "Some of the courses were informal," Maya said, attempting to maintain her deception while buying time to consider her options. Instruction from experienced personnel during assignments, participation in training exercises that weren't officially documented, that sort of thing. The answer was deliberately vague, and Dr. Martinez's expression indicated that she recognized the evasion. The psychologist leaned forward slightly, her gaze becoming more intense as she prepared to probe deeper into Maya's background. "Maya, I need to ask you something directly," Dr. Martinez said, her tone becoming more serious. "Your demonstrated capabilities suggest training and experience that go far beyond what's reflected in your official personnel record. I'm not here to cause problems for you, but I need to understand who you really are and what your true background involves." The directness of the question caught Maya off guard. She'd expected a more gradual approach, with subtle probing designed to reveal inconsistencies over time. Instead, Dr. Martinez was confronting her deception head-on, forcing a decision about how much truth she was willing to reveal. Maya remained silent for several seconds, weighing her options while Dr. Martinez waited patiently for a response. The psychologist's expression suggested sympathy rather than hostility, as if she understood that Maya was facing a difficult choice between honesty and security. "Some aspects of military service can't be discussed openly," Maya finally said, her voice carrying a note of resignation. "There are operations and assignments that remain classified for national security reasons. I can't provide details about experiences that are protected by security classifications." It wasn't a complete admission, but it was acknowledgement that her official record didn't tell the full story of her military service. Dr. Martinez recognized the significance of Maya's statement, understanding that she was dealing with someone whose true background was deliberately obscured for security reasons. "I understand the constraints you're operating under," Dr. Martinez said gently. "I've worked with personnel from classified units before, and I know how difficult it can be to maintain operational security while participating in programs like this one." The psychologist's recognition of Maya's situation brought both relief and concern. Relief, because it suggested that Dr. Martinez might be willing to work within the constraints of Maya's security obligations. Concern, because it meant that Maya's cover identity was becoming increasingly transparent to trained professionals. "What I need to understand," Dr. Martinez continued, "is whether your psychological profile is consistent with someone who can handle the stresses of Special Forces operations. Your true background may be classified, but your mental fitness for demanding assignments is something I can assess regardless of specific operational details." The evaluation continued for another hour, with Dr. Martinez probing Maya's psychological resilience, stress management capabilities, and motivational structure without requiring detailed disclosure of classified operations. It was a delicate balance that required professional skill from the psychologist and careful cooperation from Maya. When the session finally concluded, Maya felt emotionally drained but cautiously optimistic about the outcome. Dr. Martinez had demonstrated understanding of the constraints surrounding classified personnel while still conducting a thorough assessment of Maya's psychological fitness for Special Forces service. "Thank you for your honesty," Dr. Martinez said as Maya prepared to leave. "I know that wasn't easy given your situation. I'll be submitting my evaluation to Master Sergeant Ramirez within the next few days." Maya returned to the training area with the knowledge that her psychological evaluation had gone better than expected, but also with the awareness that her cover identity was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Dr. Martinez's recognition of her classified background meant that other professionals might reach similar conclusions, potentially triggering security investigations that could end her military career. The afternoon training session focused on advanced weapons systems, including specialized equipment that wasn't typically available to conventional military units. Master Sergeant Ramirez introduced the candidates to prototype rifles, advanced optics, and communication devices that represented the cutting edge of military technology. Maya's familiarity with the equipment was immediately apparent to observant instructors and candidates. She handled the prototype weapons with the confidence of someone who'd used similar systems extensively. Her weapons manipulation was flawless, and her understanding of the equipment's capabilities went far beyond what could be learned from technical manuals. "Chen," Ramirez called out during the training session, "you seem very comfortable with this equipment. Have you worked with similar systems before?" The question was loaded with implication, since the weapons they were using were highly classified and available only to specialized units conducting sensitive operations. Any honest acknowledgement of familiarity would raise serious questions about Maya's true background and security clearance levels. "The principles are similar to other weapon systems I've encountered. Maya replied carefully. Good training transfers across different platforms. It was a diplomatic evasion, but Ramirez's expression indicated that he wasn't satisfied with the explanation. The Master Sergeant had spent enough time around classified operations to recognize genuine expertise when he saw it, and Maya's competence with advanced weapons systems suggested experience that went far beyond conventional military training. That evening, as the candidates cleaned their equipment and prepared for another night in the barracks, the speculation about Maya's identity reached new levels of intensity. Her performance with the prototype weapons had convinced even the most skeptical observers that she possessed training and experience that wasn't reflected in her official record. She handled that rifle like she'd been using it for years, Torres observed to the group gathered around his bunk. Those aren't systems you can learn about in technical manuals. You've got to have hands-on experience with similar equipment to demonstrate that level of proficiency. Walsh nodded in agreement, and the way she adjusted the optics, the shooting positions she used, the maintenance procedures she followed, that's not recreational shooting or basic military training. That's advanced marksmanship instruction from specialized schools. Captain Morrison, who'd been watching Maya throughout the day with growing respect and suspicion, finally voiced what many of the candidates were thinking. I think we need to accept that Chen isn't who she appears to be. She's got training and experience that suggests involvement with classified units that operate outside normal military structures. The admission created a moment of silence as the implications sank in. If Maya was really connected to black operations units, it meant they were training alongside someone whose service record was deliberately obscured for national security reasons. It also meant that her presence at Camp Mackenzie might serve purposes that went beyond individual career advancement. The question is what we do about it, Walsh said quietly. Do we confront her directly, report our suspicions to the instructors, or do we just accept that there are things about Chen's background that we're not supposed to know? Torres, who'd been the first to notice Maya's mysterious tattoo, had a different concern. What if she's here to evaluate us? What if this whole thing is some kind of test to see how we handle classified personnel or security situations? The possibility that Maya might be conducting some form of assessment added another layer of complexity to an already confusing situation. The candidates found themselves questioning not just Maya's identity, but the nature of their own evaluation and the true purpose of the training program. Meanwhile, Maya lay in her bunk listening to the whispered conversations and knowing that her time was running out. The psychological evaluation had gone better than expected, but her performance with advanced weapons systems had revealed too much about her true background. Soon, the speculation would reach levels that triggered official investigation, and her carefully constructed cover identity would crumble under professional scrutiny. The tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse with significance as she considered her dwindling options. It was a symbol of belonging to a community that existed in the shadows of official military structures, a mark of honor earned through operations that would never be publicly acknowledged. But it was also evidence that could destroy everything she'd worked to build over the past 5 years. Maya had come to Camp Mackenzie hoping to earn her place in Special Forces through demonstrated competence rather than classified credentials. She'd wanted to prove that she could succeed based on current capabilities rather than past achievements that couldn't be officially recognized. But the training program was revealing skills and knowledge that made her cover story increasingly implausible. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Master Sergeant Ramirez announced that the training program would be visited by a special assessment team from Special Operations Command. Personnel who would observe the candidates and provide additional evaluation of their readiness for advanced training. The news sent ripples of anxiety through the candidate group, but Maya felt a chill of recognition that had nothing to do with performance evaluation. Assessment teams from Special Operations Command often included personnel from classified units, individuals who might recognize her from previous operations or identify the significance of her mysterious tattoo. Maya Chen, logistics officer and aspiring Special Forces candidate, was about to face the ultimate test of her ability to maintain her cover identity. The arrival of assessment personnel who might know her true background would either validate her carefully constructed fiction or expose the deception that had defined her life for the past 5 years. The stakes were rising, and Maya was running out of places to hide from the truth about who she really was and what she'd done in service to operations that officially never existed. The investigation phase of her story was drawing to a close, and the revelation that would change everything was just days away. As she prepared her equipment for another day of training under the scrutiny of unknown assessors, Maya made a decision that would determine the course of everything that followed. She would not retreat from the challenge or abandon her dreams because of fear about exposure. Whatever happened when the assessment team arrived, she would face it with the same courage and professionalism that had carried her through operations in the world's most dangerous places. The truth about Maya Chen was about to emerge, and there was no longer any way to prevent the revelation that would transform her from a mysterious logistics officer into something far more significant and dangerous than anyone at Camp Mackenzie had imagined possible. Thursday morning arrived with unusual activity around the Camp Mackenzie administrative buildings. Black SUVs with government plates pulled into the restricted parking area, their occupants moving with a purposeful efficiency that marked experienced military professionals. The assessment team from Special Operations Command had arrived, and their presence changed the atmosphere of the entire training facility. Maya watched the arrivals from her barracks window, studying the faces of personnel who might recognize her from previous operations. Most were unfamiliar, senior officers and enlisted personnel whose backgrounds suggested conventional special operations experience. But one figure caught her attention and sent a chill of recognition through her entire body. Colonel Patricia Hayes stepped out of the lead SUV with the bearing of someone accustomed to command in the most demanding environments. Maya had worked with Hayes during operations in Syria back when Maya operated under a different name and served with units that didn't appear on organizational charts. Hayes was one of the few people who knew Maya's true identity and the full extent of her operational background. The presence of Colonel Hayes at Camp Mackenzie couldn't be coincidental. Someone had connected Maya Chen, logistics officer, with her previous identity as a black operations specialist. The question was whether Hayes was here to protect Maya's cover or to expose the deception that had defined her life for the past 5 years. The assessment team spent Thursday morning in meetings with the training cadre, reviewing candidate files and discussing evaluation criteria. Maya went through the motions of normal training activities, but her attention was focused on preparing for what seemed like an inevitable confrontation with her past. During the lunch break, Master Sergeant Ramirez approached Maya with an expression that suggested significant developments were coming. "Chen, report to the administrative building at 1400 hours. Colonel Hayes wants to speak with you privately." The summons was expected but still jarring. Maya had spent 5 years avoiding exactly this kind of official attention, and now she was being called to meet with someone who could destroy her carefully constructed identity with a single conversation. "Roger. Master Sergeant," Maya replied, her voice carefully controlled despite the anxiety coursing through her system. "Should I bring any particular documentation or equipment?" Ramirez studied Maya with the intense focus of someone trying to solve a complex puzzle. "Just bring yourself, Chen. I think you'll find that Colonel Hayes has all the documentation she needs." The implication was clear. Hayes knew exactly who Maya was and had access to records that revealed her true background and operational history. The meeting would either result in official recognition of Maya's classified service or exposure that would end her military career and potentially trigger security investigations. Maya spent the early afternoon in a state of heightened alertness, her mind cycling through possible scenarios and responses. She could attempt to maintain her cover story, but Hayes possessed first-hand knowledge that would make such deception impossible. Alternatively, she could acknowledge her true identity and hope that Hayes was prepared to work within the constraints of ongoing security classifications. At precisely 1400 hours, Maya reported to the administrative building and was escorted to a secure conference room that had been set up for private meetings. Colonel Hayes sat alone at a polished table, reviewing documents that Maya recognized as classified personnel files from her previous service. "Close the door and have a seat," Hayes said without looking up from the files. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with sensitive information in complex security situations. Maya complied, taking a seat across from Hayes while maintaining the military bearing that had served her throughout both of her identities. The colonel was an impressive figure, someone who'd earned respect through competence and integrity during decades of service in some of the military's most demanding assignments. "It's been a long time," Hayes said, finally looking up from the documents. 5 years since Operation Blackwater ended, and you disappeared into the logistics community. I have to admit, you've done an impressive job of creating a new identity." The acknowledgement of Maya's true background brought both relief and apprehension. Relief because the deception was finally over. Apprehension because the consequences of exposure remained unclear. "Colonel Hayes," Maya replied formally. "I assume you're here because someone connected Maya Chen with my previous service record." Hayes smiled slightly, an expression that suggested both professional respect and personal warmth. "Actually, I'm here because someone finally put together enough pieces to realize that one of our most decorated black operations specialists was wasting her talents in logistics assignments." The comment was unexpected and encouraging. Hayes seemed more interested in Maya's current potential than in punishing her for the deception she'd maintained over the past 5 years. "Your performance in this training program has been exceptional," Hayes continued. "Master Sergeant Ramirez and his team are impressed by your capabilities, though they've been puzzled by the disconnect between your official background and demonstrated competence." Maya remained silent, unsure how much she should reveal about her motivations for hiding her true identity or her goals for the current training program. "I know why you left the classified community," Hayes said gently. "Operation Blackwater was a difficult assignment that cost good people their lives. Your decision to seek conventional military assignments was understandable given what you'd experienced." The mention of Operation Blackwater triggered memories that Maya had spent 5 years trying to suppress. It had been her final classified mission, an operation that went wrong in ways that cost teammates their lives and left her questioning whether she wanted to continue serving in the shadows of official military structures. "But hiding your capabilities and experience isn't serving anyone's interests," Hayes continued. "The military needs operators with your background and skills, especially as we face increasingly complex global threats." Maya finally found her voice. "Colonel, I came to Camp Mackenzie because I wanted to earn my place in Special Forces based on current performance rather than classified credentials. I wanted to prove that I could succeed without relying on operational history that can't be officially acknowledged." Hayes nodded with understanding. "That's commendable, and from what I've observed, you've succeeded in demonstrating your capabilities. But the question now is whether you're ready to return to the kind of service that makes full use of your background and training." The offer implicit in Hayes's words was both tempting and terrifying. Maya had spent 5 years building a new identity based on conventional military service, but the training program at Camp Mackenzie had awakened instincts and abilities that belonged to her previous life. "What exactly are you proposing, Colonel?" Maya asked. Hayes leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "Special Operations Command is establishing a new unit that will conduct missions requiring personnel with your specific background and capabilities. We need operators who can blend into conventional military structures while maintaining the skills necessary for classified operations." The proposal was intriguing, but also raised concerns about returning to the kind of work that had driven Maya to seek anonymity in the first place. The psychological cost of classified operations was something she'd experienced personally, and she wasn't certain she was ready to resume that burden. "The unit would operate differently from your previous assignments," Hayes continued, recognizing Maya's hesitation. "Better support structures, clearer mission parameters, and recognition for personnel who've sacrificed personal identity in service to national security." It was an acknowledgement of the problems that had plagued black operations units in the past, along with a promise that future assignments would address the issues that had driven talented operators away from classified service. "I need time to consider this," Maya said finally. Hayes smiled. "I expected you would. Take all the time you need, but understand that your cover identity is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. People are asking questions about your background, and eventually those questions will trigger official investigations." The warning was delivered gently but carried clear implications. Maya's deception was unraveling, and she would need to make decisions about her future before circumstances forced those decisions upon her. "Complete your training here at Camp Mackenzie," Hayes advised. "Demonstrate your capabilities officially and earn the recognition you deserve. Then we can discuss your next assignment with full knowledge of what you bring to the table." The meeting concluded with Hayes providing Maya with contact information and instructions for reaching her when she was ready to discuss future assignments. As Maya prepared to leave, the colonel made one final observation that would prove prophetic. "Your teammates here have been speculating about your tattoo," Hayes said with a knowing smile. "They recognize it as a symbol from classified units, but they don't understand its specific significance. That tattoo represents some of the most dangerous and important work done in defense of this country. You should be proud of what it symbolizes." Maya returned to the training area with her mind racing. The conversation with Colonel Hayes had resolved the immediate threat of exposure, while opening possibilities for future service that could make full use of her background and capabilities. But it had also confirmed that her carefully constructed cover identity was approaching its expiration date. That evening, as the candidates gathered for their usual discussions about training and speculation about Maya's background, she made a decision that would change the dynamic of everything that followed. She rolled up her sleeves while cleaning her rifle, fully exposing the tattoo that had been the subject of so much curiosity and speculation. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Torres, who'd caught glimpses of the marking over previous weeks, stared in recognition and something approaching awe. Walsh moved closer to examine the intricate design, her expression shifting from curiosity to respect, as she recognized symbols that spoke of service in the most dangerous and classified operations. Captain Morrison studied the tattoo with the analytical eye of someone who'd served alongside personnel from similar units. The design was unmistakably military, but not from any conventional organization. It spoke of membership in communities that existed in the spaces between official structures, groups that handled missions too sensitive for normal acknowledgement. "Holy shit," Torres whispered, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and amazement. "That's a Phantom Battalion marking. I saw one like it in Afghanistan, worn by an operator who officially didn't exist." The identification of Maya's tattoo as belonging to Phantom Battalion sent a shock through the assembled candidates. Phantom Battalion was legendary in special operations circles, a unit that conducted missions so classified that their very existence was denied by official sources. Operators from Phantom Battalion were considered among the most skilled and dangerous personnel in the entire military. Maya looked around at the faces staring at her, seeing recognition, respect, and a dozen questions that would reshape every interaction going forward. Her cover identity as a simple logistics officer was finished, destroyed by her own decision to reveal the marking that connected her to operations that officially never happened. "Yeah," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of resignation mixed with something that might have been relief. "I served with Phantom Battalion for 5 years before transitioning to conventional assignments. The admission transformed the entire atmosphere in the barracks." Maya Chen was no longer a mysterious logistics officer with suspicious competence. She was a verified black operations veteran whose presence at Camp Mackenzie suddenly made perfect sense to everyone who'd been puzzling over her capabilities. But the revelation also raised new questions about her motivations for hiding such an impressive background and her goals for the current training program. Why would someone with Phantom Battalion credentials need to prove herself in conventional Special Forces selection? What had driven her to abandon classified operations in favor of conventional military service? Maya spent the next hour answering questions and sharing carefully edited stories about her previous service, always mindful of security classifications, but finally able to acknowledge the source of her mysterious competence. The relief of dropping her cover identity was profound, even as she recognized that exposure would bring its own complications. The candidates who dismissed her as unqualified now looked at her with expressions that mixed respect, curiosity, and something approaching intimidation. Maya Chen wasn't just another candidate competing for Special Forces selection. She was a proven operator whose credentials exceeded those of most of the instructors evaluating their performance. As the evening wound down and the candidates prepared for sleep, Maya felt the weight of 5 years of deception lifting from her shoulders. She was no longer hiding behind a carefully constructed fiction, no longer pretending to be weaker and less experienced than her true background suggested. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as she navigated the changed dynamics of her relationships with other candidates and instructors. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, Maya Chen could sleep as her authentic self. The decorated black operations veteran who'd earned her place among the military's most elite personnel through service and operations that would never be publicly acknowledged. The investigation phase of her story was complete. The truth about Maya Chen had been revealed, and the final phase of her journey toward official Special Forces recognition could begin with honesty about who she was and what she'd accomplished in service to missions that existed in the shadows of conventional military structures. The morning after Maya's revelation brought an atmosphere of profound change to Camp Mackenzie. Word had spread throughout the facility that one of the candidates was a decorated Phantom Battalion veteran, and the reaction from instructors and support personnel was immediate and dramatic. Master Sergeant Ramirez arrived at the candidate barracks earlier than usual, his expression mixing professional curiosity with something that might have been embarrassment. "Chen," Ramirez called out as the candidates prepared for morning formation. Report to my office immediately after breakfast. We need to discuss your status in this program. The summons wasn't unexpected, but it carried implications that made Maya's stomach tighten with anxiety. Her decision to reveal her true background had solved one set of problems, while potentially creating others. The training program was designed for conventional soldiers seeking entry into special forces, not for Black operations veterans whose credentials already exceeded most selection standards. Breakfast was a surreal experience. Maya sat at her usual table, but the dynamics of every interaction had changed overnight. Candidates who'd previously treated her with condescension now approached with respectful curiosity. Staff Sergeant Torres, who'd been the first to suspect her true identity, sat across from her with an expression of genuine awe. "I have to ask," Torres said quietly, glancing around to ensure their conversation remained private, "why were you hiding your background? With Phantom Battalion credentials, you could have walked into any Special Forces unit in the military." Maya considered her answer carefully. The truth was complicated, involving psychological trauma from classified operations and a desire to rebuild her identity around conventional military service. But explaining those motivations required sharing details about Operation Blackwater and other missions that remained sensitive even among personnel with high security clearances. "Sometimes you need to prove to yourself that you can succeed based on current capabilities rather than past achievements," Maya replied. "I wanted to earn my place in Special Forces through demonstrated performance, not because of credentials from operations that can't be officially acknowledged." It was a diplomatic answer that hinted at deeper truths without revealing the full complexity of her motivations. Torres nodded with understanding, recognizing the psychological challenges that could drive someone to seek anonymity after years of classified service. Captain Morrison approached their table with the measured steps of someone who'd spent the night reconsidering every interaction he'd had with Maya over the past 3 weeks. His initial dismissiveness had been replaced by professional respect mixed with curiosity about how he'd so completely misjudged her background and capabilities. "I owe you an apology," Morrison said, his voice carrying genuine remorse. "I made assumptions about your qualifications that were completely wrong. Your performance has been exceptional from day one, and I should have recognized that you possessed training and experience that went far beyond conventional military assignments." Maya accepted the apology graciously, understanding that Morrison's initial skepticism had been reasonable given her carefully constructed cover identity. She deliberately presented herself as an inexperienced logistics officer, and his reaction had been exactly what she'd intended to achieve. "No apology necessary, Captain," Maya replied. "I was deliberately hiding my background, so your assessment was based on the information available to you." Sergeant First Class Walsh joined the conversation with questions about Maya's transition from Black operations to conventional military service. As someone who'd served multiple combat deployments in conventional special operations units, Walsh was curious about the differences between classified missions and acknowledged military operations. "What's it like going from missions that never officially happened to conventional military assignments?" Walsh asked. "The psychological adjustment must have been significant." The question touched on issues that Maya had struggled with throughout her 5 years of conventional service. The transition from high-stakes classified operations to routine logistics work had been profoundly disorienting, like shifting from living in vivid color to existing in shades of gray. "It's complicated," Maya admitted. "Classified operations involve a level of intensity and significance that's difficult to replicate in conventional assignments. But there are also psychological costs that make normal military service appealing after extended periods in the classified community." The conversation was interrupted by Master Sergeant Ramirez's approach. His expression suggested that Maya's meeting with him would involve significant decisions about her future in the training program, and possibly in the military as a whole. "Chen, let's go," Ramirez said. "We have a lot to discuss, and Colonel Hayes wants to participate in our conversation." Maya followed Ramirez to his office, where Colonel Hayes waited with documents that appeared to be official personnel files and assignment orders. The presence of both officers suggested that decisions had been made about Maya's future, though the nature of those decisions remained unclear. "Sit down, Maya," Hayes said, using her first name in a way that suggested the formal barriers of rank and protocol were being temporarily suspended. "We need to discuss your options going forward." Maya took the offered seat, maintaining military bearing while preparing for what could be career-defining news. The combination of her revealed background and her performance in the training program had created a situation that required careful handling from senior leadership. "Your performance in this program has been outstanding," Ramirez began. "Your tactical knowledge, leadership capabilities, and operational competence exceed the standards we expect from Special Forces candidates. Under normal circumstances, you'd be fast-tracked through the remaining phases of selection." The praise was gratifying, but Maya sensed that complications were coming. Nothing about her situation was normal, and the revelation of her Phantom Battalion background had created administrative challenges that conventional selection procedures weren't designed to handle. "However," Hayes continued, "your classified background creates some unique considerations. Phantom Battalion operations remain highly sensitive, and your presence in conventional Special Forces units could raise security concerns that would be difficult to manage." Maya felt her heart sink as she recognized the implication. Her Black operations background, which she'd hoped would demonstrate her qualifications for Special Forces service, might actually disqualify her from the conventional military assignments she'd been seeking. "Are you saying that my previous service makes me ineligible for Special Forces selection?" Maya asked, struggling to keep disappointment out of her voice. Hayes smiled, an expression that suggested Maya had misunderstood the direction of the conversation. "Actually, we're saying that you're overqualified for conventional Special Forces selection. What we're proposing is something different entirely." Ramirez pulled out a set of documents that bore classification markings Maya recognized from her previous service. The papers appeared to be assignment orders for a unit designation she'd never encountered before. "Task Force Nightfall is being established to handle missions that require personnel with your specific background and capabilities," Hayes explained. "It's a hybrid unit that operates at the intersection of conventional special operations and classified activities." The proposal was intriguing but also raised concerns about returning to the kind of work that had driven Maya to seek anonymity in conventional military service. She'd left the classified community because of the psychological costs associated with operations that existed in moral and legal gray areas. "This isn't the same kind of assignment you had with Phantom Battalion," Hayes continued, recognizing Maya's hesitation. "Task Force Nightfall will operate with full legal authority, clear mission parameters, and support structures designed to address the issues that have plagued Black operations units in the past." Maya studied the documents while considering the implications of accepting such an assignment. Task Force Nightfall appeared to be an attempt to combine the capabilities of classified units with the accountability and support systems of conventional military operations. "What would my role be in this unit?" Maya asked. "Team leader for operations requiring your specific skill set," Ramirez replied. "You'd be responsible for training conventional special operations personnel in advanced techniques while leading missions that require Black operations expertise." The position would allow Maya to use her full range of capabilities while serving in an officially acknowledged capacity. It was an opportunity to bridge the gap between her classified background and her desire for conventional military recognition. "There's one more consideration," Hayes added. "Several of the candidates from this training program have been selected for Task Force Nightfall assignments. Your teammates here would be among the personnel you'd be working with in the new unit." The revelation that other candidates would be joining Task Force Nightfall added another dimension to Maya's decision. She'd developed professional relationships with Torres, Walsh, Morrison, and others during the training program, and the opportunity to continue working with them was appealing. Maya spent several minutes reviewing the assignment documents while Hayes and Ramirez waited patiently for her decision. Task Force Nightfall represented a compromise between her classified background and her desire for conventional service, but it also meant returning to the kind of high-stakes operations she'd been trying to leave behind. "I need to understand something," Maya said finally. "My decision to leave Phantom Battalion was based on psychological concerns about the costs associated with classified operations. How will Task Force Nightfall address those issues?" Hayes leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "Task Force Nightfall will operate with full psychological support, clear legal authority, and rotation policies, designed to prevent the kind of psychological isolation that affected personnel in previous classified units." The assurances were encouraging, but Maya had heard similar promises before. The nature of classified operations created psychological pressures that were difficult to mitigate regardless of support structures and policy reforms. "I know you have concerns based on your previous experience," Hayes continued, "but the military has learned from the mistakes made with earlier Black operations programs. Task Force Nightfall is designed to avoid the problems that drove talented operators away from classified service. Maya made her decision with the sudden clarity that comes from recognizing an opportunity that perfectly matches personal goals and professional capabilities. Task Force Nightfall offered everything she'd been seeking: official recognition for her skills, leadership responsibilities that made full use of her background, and the opportunity to serve alongside colleagues she'd grown to respect. "I accept the assignment," Maya said, her voice carrying conviction that surprised even her. "When does Task Force Nightfall become operational?" Hayes smiled with genuine satisfaction. "Formation begins immediately. You'll spend the next month at Fort Bragg establishing unit procedures and training protocols. Your first operational deployment is scheduled for early next year." The meeting concluded with administrative details about Maya's new assignment and the transition process from the training program to Task Force Nightfall. As she prepared to leave, Ramirez made an observation that would prove significant for her future relationships with other military personnel. "Chen, your decision to hide your background for the past 5 years shows remarkable humility and dedication to service," Ramirez said. "Not many people with your credentials would be willing to start over in conventional assignments just to prove themselves." The comment reminded Maya of the journey she'd taken from classified operations through conventional military service to her new assignment with Task Force Nightfall. Each phase had taught her something important about herself and her motivations for military service. Maya returned to the candidate barracks to find her teammates engaged in intense discussions about the morning's developments. Word had spread that several candidates would be receiving new assignments related to their performance in the training program, and speculation was running high about the nature of those opportunities. "Chen," Torres called out as she entered the barracks, "we heard you met with Colonel Hayes and Master Sergeant Ramirez. Can you tell us what's happening with the program?" Maya gathered the candidates around her bunk, preparing to share news that would change the trajectory of their military careers. The formation of Task Force Nightfall wasn't classified information, but it represented opportunities that none of them had expected when they'd arrived at Camp Mackenzie. "How would you feel about serving in a unit that combines conventional special operations with advanced techniques borrowed from classified programs?" Maya asked, watching their reactions carefully. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Every candidate in the group recognized the significance of such an opportunity, understanding that it would provide access to training and missions that exceeded anything available in conventional military assignments. "Are you talking about some kind of black operations unit?" Walsh asked, her voice carrying excitement mixed with professional curiosity. "Task Force Nightfall," Maya replied. "A new unit that operates at the intersection of conventional special operations and classified activities. Several of you have been selected for assignment to the unit." The revelation that they'd been chosen for Task Force Nightfall assignments created an atmosphere of excitement and anticipation that transformed the entire dynamic of the candidate group. These weren't just soldiers completing a training program anymore. They were personnel who'd been selected for one of the most exclusive and challenging assignments in the military. Captain Morrison approached Maya with an expression that mixed respect with curiosity about her role in the new unit. "What's your assignment with Task Force Nightfall?" "Team leader," Maya replied. "I'll be responsible for training and leading operations that require specialized techniques." The announcement that Maya would be leading some of her former fellow candidates created a moment of adjustment as relationships shifted from peer-level competition to hierarchical command structures. But the transition was smoothed by the respect she'd earned through her performance and the revelation of her impressive background. Over the following days, the selected candidates received detailed briefings about Task Force Nightfall and their specific roles within the unit. The assignment represented everything they'd hoped to achieve through Special Forces selection, but with additional opportunities that exceeded their original expectations. Maya found herself serving as an informal liaison between the candidates and the command structure, helping her teammates understand the unique challenges and opportunities associated with their new assignments. Her experience with classified operations provided valuable perspective on the psychological and professional demands they would face. The training program at Camp Mackenzie concluded with a ceremony that recognized the exceptional performance of all candidates, while acknowledging the special circumstances surrounding Maya's participation. Master Sergeant Ramirez presented her with a certificate of completion that included a notation about her outstanding demonstration of leadership and tactical competence. "Chen, your presence in this program raised the performance standards for everyone involved," Ramirez said during the ceremony. Your teammates became better soldiers because they were training alongside someone with your capabilities and experience. The recognition was gratifying, but Maya found greater satisfaction in the knowledge that she'd successfully bridged the gap between her classified background and conventional military service. Task Force Nightfall represented the perfect synthesis of her skills, experience, and professional goals. Following the ceremony, the selected candidates prepared for transfer to Fort Bragg and the beginning of their new assignments. Maya packed her equipment with the same methodical precision she'd displayed throughout the training program, but her movements carried a confidence and purpose that had been missing during her years of conventional military service. As she folded her uniforms, Maya caught sight of the Phantom Battalion tattoo that had been the catalyst for revealing her true identity. The intricate design no longer felt like a burden or a liability. Instead, it had become a bridge between her past achievements and future opportunities, a symbol of continuity rather than concealment. Torres approached as Maya finished packing, his expression mixing gratitude with anticipation about their future working relationship. I want to thank you for everything you taught us during this program. Having someone with your background as a teammate made all of us better soldiers. Maya accepted the thanks graciously while recognizing that her role as mentor and leader was just beginning. Task Force Nightfall would provide opportunities to share the knowledge and skills she'd developed during her classified service while working alongside some of the most capable personnel in the military. We're going to do great things together, Maya replied. Task Force Nightfall is going to set new standards for what special operations units can accomplish. The transfer to Fort Bragg took place over a weekend, giving the selected personnel time to settle into their new assignments before beginning the intensive training program that would prepare them for operational deployment. Maya found herself assigned to housing that reflected her leadership position within the unit, with access to facilities and resources that matched her responsibilities. Task Force Nightfall's headquarters occupied a secure facility that combined the best aspects of conventional military installations with the specialized requirements of classified operations. The command structure was lean but professional, with personnel drawn from the most successful special operations units across all service branches. Maya's first meeting with her new commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, established the tone for everything that would follow. Mitchell was a veteran of multiple special operations assignments who understood both the capabilities and challenges associated with personnel from classified backgrounds. Maya, I've reviewed your service record from both your conventional assignments and your classified operations, Mitchell began. Task Force Nightfall is designed specifically to make full use of capabilities like yours, while providing the support structures that were missing from earlier Black Operations programs. The conversation covered Maya's role as team leader, her responsibilities for training conventional personnel in advanced techniques, and her authority to develop operational procedures that drew from both conventional and classified sources. It was the kind of assignment she'd been seeking without fully realizing it existed. Your team will consist of the candidates from Camp Mackenzie plus several personnel with complementary backgrounds, Mitchell explained. The combination of conventional special operations experience and classified techniques should create capabilities that exceed either approach individually. Maya spent her first week at Fort Bragg developing training programs that would prepare her team for the unique challenges they would face. The curriculum combined conventional special operations techniques with advanced methods borrowed from classified programs, creating a comprehensive approach to high-stakes missions. When Torres, Walsh, Morrison, and the other selected candidates arrived at Fort Bragg, they found Maya had prepared detailed training schedules that would test every aspect of their capabilities. The programs were demanding but fair, designed to develop genuine competence rather than simply demonstrate toughness. Welcome to Task Force Nightfall, Maya said during their first team meeting. Over the next 3 months, we're going to push the boundaries of what special operations teams can accomplish. By the time we complete training, we'll be ready for missions that other units can't handle. The training program that followed was unlike anything the conventional personnel had experienced during their military careers. Maya drew from techniques she'd learned during Phantom Battalion operations while adapting them for use by personnel with conventional backgrounds. The result was a comprehensive approach to advanced operations that prepared them for scenarios they'd never encountered before. Physical conditioning was just the beginning. Maya introduced them to psychological preparation methods that helped personnel maintain effectiveness during extended high-stress operations. She shared infiltration techniques that went beyond anything taught in conventional schools. Most importantly, she taught them how to operate in the moral and legal gray areas that characterized some classified missions while maintaining personal integrity and professional standards. The candidates who'd trained with Maya at Camp Mackenzie adapted quickly to the advanced techniques, but their progress exceeded even her expectations. Working with someone whose background they respected and trusted accelerated their learning in ways that surprised even experienced training personnel. Captain Morrison, who'd initially dismissed Maya as unqualified for Special Forces selection, emerged as one of the most capable team members. His leadership experience combined with the advanced techniques Maya taught him created capabilities that exceeded those of most special operations officers. Staff Sergeant Torres developed into a reconnaissance specialist whose skills approached those of personnel from the most elite units. His natural aptitude for fieldcraft, enhanced by Maya's specialized training, made him invaluable for missions requiring intelligence gathering in hostile environments. Sergeant First Class Walsh became an expert in close-quarters combat and urban operations, mastering techniques that few conventional personnel ever encountered. Her aggressive approach to problems, refined through Maya's mentorship, created a formidable operator capable of handling the most dangerous assignments. By the end of the 3-month training program, Task Force Nightfall had evolved into one of the most capable special operations teams in the military. The combination of conventional experience and classified techniques had created capabilities that exceeded the sum of their individual parts. Maya's role as team leader had evolved naturally from her position as mentor and trainer. Her teammates respected her knowledge and experience while trusting her judgment in operational situations. The psychological dynamics that had made her effective during classified operations translated perfectly to conventional team leadership. Task Force Nightfall's first operational deployment came sooner than expected. Intelligence sources had identified a terrorist network that was planning attacks against American interests, using techniques that exceeded the capabilities of conventional counterterrorism units. The mission would require the kind of advanced infiltration and direct action capabilities that Maya's team had been training to provide. The pre-deployment briefing took place in a secure facility that reminded Maya of similar sessions during her Phantom Battalion service. Maps, intelligence summaries, and operational plans covered every surface, creating an environment of focused intensity that brought out the best in highly trained personnel. "This mission will test everything we've learned during training," Maya told her team as they reviewed the operational plan. "We're going after targets that other units can't reach, using methods that push the boundaries of conventional special operations." The mission itself unfolded with the precision and effectiveness that validated everything Task Force Nightfall had been designed to achieve. Maya's team infiltrated hostile territory, gathered critical intelligence, and neutralized threats, while maintaining the kind of operational security that protected both their identities and their methods. Torres's reconnaissance work provided intelligence that conventional sources couldn't access. Walsh's close-quarters combat skills proved decisive during direct action phases. Morrison's leadership capabilities enabled complex coordination that maximized team effectiveness while minimizing risks. But it was Maya's integration of conventional and classified techniques that made the mission successful in ways that exceeded all expectations. Her ability to adapt advanced methods to conventional team structures created capabilities that were unprecedented in special operations history. The success of Task Force Nightfall's first deployment established the unit's reputation throughout the special operations community. Word spread that a new team was achieving results that other units couldn't match, using techniques that represented the next evolution in advanced military operations. Maya found herself recognized as one of the most innovative team leaders in the military, someone who'd successfully bridged the gap between classified operations and conventional special forces. Her approach to training and leadership became a model for other units seeking to enhance their capabilities. But the greatest satisfaction came from watching her teammates develop into operators whose capabilities exceeded anything they'd believed possible when they'd first arrived at Camp Mackenzie. Torres, Walsh, Morrison, and the others had evolved from conventional special operations candidates into personnel who could handle the most demanding missions in the military. 6 months after Task Force Nightfall became operational, Maya received a letter that brought her journey full circle. It was from Master Sergeant Ramirez, who'd been following the unit's success with professional pride and personal satisfaction. "Chen," the letter read, "I wanted you to know how proud I am of what you and your team have accomplished. Your decision to reveal your background during training took courage, and the success of Task Force Nightfall proves that you made the right choice. Maya kept the letter on her desk as a reminder of the journey that had taken her from hiding her identity as a logistics officer to leading one of the most successful special operations teams in the military. The Phantom Battalion tattoo on her arm no longer represented a burden to be concealed, but a foundation for achievements that exceeded anything she'd accomplished during her classified service. Task Force Nightfall continued to evolve and grow, taking on increasingly complex missions while maintaining the effectiveness that had established their reputation. Maya's leadership provided stability and continuity, while her innovative approach to training and operations kept the team at the forefront of special operations development. The unit became a destination assignment for the most capable personnel from across the special operations community. Officers and enlisted personnel sought transfer to Task Force Nightfall because they knew it represented the pinnacle of what could be achieved through dedication, training, and innovative leadership. Maya Chen had successfully transformed herself from a hidden black operations veteran into an acknowledged leader whose contributions were recognized throughout the military. Her decision to reveal her true identity had unlocked opportunities that exceeded anything she'd imagined possible when she'd first decided to leave the classified community. The journey from concealment to recognition had been difficult and sometimes dangerous, but it had ultimately led to the kind of service that honored both her past achievements and her future potential. Maya had found a way to use every aspect of her background and experience in service to missions that made a genuine difference in national security. As she prepared for Task Force Nightfall's next deployment, Maya reflected on the path that had brought her to this point. From classified operations through conventional military service to innovative special operations leadership, each phase had contributed to her development as both a warrior and a leader. The tattoo on her arm caught the light as she reviewed operational plans, its intricate design, a permanent reminder of the journey that had defined her military career. Maya Chen had finally found her place in the military, serving with honor in a role that made full use of her capabilities while providing the recognition and support she'd been seeking throughout her years of service. Task Force Nightfall represented the perfect synthesis of everything she'd learned and everything she'd hoped to achieve. Leading a team of exceptional personnel on missions that pushed the boundaries of what special operations could accomplish was exactly the kind of service she'd been meant to provide. Maya had stopped hiding from her past and started building a future that honored every aspect of her journey through the complex world of military service. The scared logistics officer who tried to conceal her background had evolved into a confident leader whose influence extended throughout the special operations community. Her story had become one of transformation, courage, and the kind of leadership that emerged when someone finally found the perfect intersection of their capabilities, experience, and opportunities for service. Maya Chen had earned her place among the military's most respected leaders through a journey that proved the value of persistence, authenticity, and the courage to reveal one's true potential when the moment was right. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.